I was done with football. I was ready for something else. When I left, I thought I was never coming back to America.
Oh,
And that
really?
was another thing. The Dolphins sued me for $8 million, and so that that was kind of there in the back of my mind. What's the big deal? It's only pop.
3, 2, 1, yeah!
Welcome to Willing to Fail. I'm your host, Peyton Bennett, and today we got a very special guest. He was a two-time unanimous All-American in college. He was also the 1998 Heisman Trophy winner. He was a first-team All-Pro in the NFL in 2002. He is now the owner and founder of Heisman Cannabis Company. And when he graduated from Texas, he broke 21 NCAA records, 24 Big 12 records, 46 school records at Texas. Oh, and he was also a professional baseball player. Welcome to the show, Ricky Williams. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
So I've obviously seen your journey and doing more research for this. I think, dude, your story is so unique, and I think you're just a very unique guy. I don't think there's many stories that align with yours. Looking at your conversations and other like press, like on the Pat McAfee show, it seems like the clear reason you were so great is just a combination of two things: is like natural gifted talent, but then also like I feel like you're at a higher intellectual level than most people. So kind of the mix of those two, I think, is what made you special. So at what age did you realize like that you're more athletically gifted than people and then more like intellectually gifted than most people?
Yeah. Well, the athletically gifted very early on. So I remember kindergarten. It was kindergarten, and our kindergarten teacher made us take 2 laps around the field every single morning. She was really into fitness. And I remember the first day I was like, man, I don't feel like running around this field twice. And then I think it was probably the third day, this thought popped into my mind is I wonder if I can be the first one, like the first one around. And so I tried as hard as I could, and I lapped a couple of people. And I guess I got a confidence boost from that. And so every day for the rest of the year, I was the first one. I lapped people. I was the first one around the track. And so I was the fastest kid in kindergarten. Then I was the fastest kid in first grade, second grade, so forth and so on. And so I was always identified at a very young age as a good athlete. Intellectually, that took longer to develop. Um, my mom really stressed education and common sense, and so she really literally like beat that into me. And when I combined that with my athletic ability, it gave me a huge advantage. Yeah.
And from a young age, were you just interested in like all sports, or was it mostly like football and baseball, or when did you start like really growing in love with football itself?
Yeah, football came much later. First, it was baseball. I had a second grade teacher who would take us outside every Friday when we behaved, and we'd play baseball together, and really affected me. And so, from the time I was 7, I was listening to Padres games. I grew up in San Diego, listening to Padres games on the radio, and I always thought I would be a professional baseball player. And then about 13, when NBC got the Notre Dame contract. And so every Saturday there was Notre Dame football on. And I just fell in love with the tradition of college football. So as I got to high school, I said, okay, I told all of the baseball scouts that I'm going to play college football. And I told all of the football scouts that I want to be a minor league baseball player. And I was good enough that I was allowed to do both. And it was cool. I had a really cool experience of playing big time college football for most of the year and then playing small time minor league baseball for the summers.
Yeah, I don't even think it's nowadays it's so rare to see people to even try and do that. Like, was that what kind of, I mean, growing up in San Diego and going to Texas, was that part of the reason you went there is because they would allow you to play baseball, or all the schools looking at you allowing you to play baseball?
Yeah, all the schools they were gonna allow me to play. I think Bo Jackson did it for 1 year. Deion Sanders did it for 1 year. I think I was probably one of the first people to do both for all 4 years of college. And, it was kind of NIL before NIL because I was a professional baseball player that I wasn't allowed to be on scholarship. And I got a decent signing bonus. So it was a cool experience. And you said it earlier. I think I've always, it's not even that I've tried, I've always been different. And I think at first I tried to fit in, and then I got to the point where as time went on, I tried less and less to fit in, and I allowed myself just to be different.
So when you're in that moment in college, you're playing baseball and football, or is it in your mind, or you like, I'm going to the NFL and I'm just using baseball as like to kind of fund my way? Or was it in your mind where you're like, I want to play professional baseball and football at the highest level?
Yeah, when I was a kid, Bo Jackson was one of my idols, and when I was a kid, there's Upper Deck baseball card that had Bo Jackson in shoulder pads with a bat over his shoulders. So I always had that image in the back of my mind. But honestly, I never really identified as a professional football player, really a professional baseball player. But I had such a, I mean, as you mentioned, all the records and stuff. I had such a productive college career. It just made sense to go down the football route. And then when I got to the NFL, most of the NFL teams were like, "You're not playing baseball." So they forced me to kind of make a decision, and I was much better at football at that time, so I chose to stick with football.
Yeah. So at baseball, were you just playing mostly like rookie ball, or like did you get up to single A or double A, or where were you at?
Yeah, so I got drafted out of high school, and my first assignment was Martinsville, Virginia, which was rookie ball, and then it was interesting. My mom negotiated my baseball contract, and my mom does contracts for sort of for her whole life. So she did a really good job negotiating my contract. And when we were negotiating, she said, "What if you decide to quit football and play baseball full time?" So she put a stipulation in the contract that if I ever showed up for spring training, then I would get like $150,000 bonus. And so after my freshman season at Texas, um, we found a loophole that you can take one semester off and still be eligible for athletics. And
Oh, wow.
so I took the spring off, and I went to spring training, and I played 100 and something baseball games. And that's when I kind of knew that baseball wasn't for me, like professional baseball wasn't for me, because they play so many games. They play every day. And my nature is I'm very streaky, hot and cold. And so if I have time to relax and downtime, it works for me. But playing every day, it was a lot. But I got that big bonus, and then I still kept playing. And so the second year I went to Piedmont, which is an A team, A ball. And then the next year I played at Piedmont again, A ball. And then my final year, they sent me to Batavia, which was short season A ball. So I didn't get out of A ball, but I played at four different teams.
Oh, wow. So what position were you playing mostly?
Now, I grew up a third baseman, shortstop, and towards the end of high school, they put me in center field a little bit because I could run. And when I was drafted, they put me in left field because they drafted a guy. The Phillies drafted a guy by the name of Reggie Taylor, who's an amazing athlete who played center field, and so I was in left.
So you could just kind of play wherever.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I saw a quote that were you playing minor league baseball with Jimmy Rollins at one point?
Yeah, I played with J-Ro. Again, that was the long season, and that's when I learned a valuable lesson that you got to really love baseball, to go out there and do it every day. Because J-Ro would wake up every day like I used to in Little League, when we played twice a week. He was like that every day. He was so much fun to play with.
Yeah, I think the quote I saw online is that he said you're the fastest man he's ever seen.
Yeah. I used to get down the baseline.
I bet you would have loved the way the new rules are now for stealing bases.
Oh, wow, definitely. I'd be stealing bases all the time.
Okay, so you're having like a ton of success with football at Texas, and then like your junior year comes around and you're projected to be like a high draft pick. What made you want to stay for your senior year?
Well, back to what I said earlier, my whole thing with football wasn't really about being a professional athlete. It was about being a college football player. And, I had such a good junior year. I started to listen to those voices saying, go on. And then I took a couple of weeks off, and I just thought about it. And I said, I'm in a position where I can win the Heisman Trophy, And then I was in my our media guy, John Bianco. I was in his office, and I was flipping through the college football almanac. And I flipped to most career rushing yards ever in the NCAA. And I saw that I was like fifth on the list, but I saw if I had a similar year to my junior year that I could be the all-time leading rusher in college football history. And then I flipped a couple of pages, and I got to touchdowns, and I saw that, oh, wow, if I have as many touchdowns as I had my junior year, I'll have the most touchdowns ever in college football history. Then I flipped a couple more pages and I got the all-purpose yards. Same story. I saw, wow, if I have a year that I had my junior year, I can have the most all-purpose yards ever in history of the NCAA. And after having that experience, I was like, how many times do people get this close to making history? And I said,
Yeah.
I'm close enough. I got to take my shot. And so I came back and I ended up checking off 4 boxes. I won the Heisman Trophy, got the record for most touchdowns, the record for most rushing yards, and the record for most all-purpose yards.
That's awesome. I don't think you really see that as much today, especially with NIL and transfer portal and all that stuff. I don't think people really value the history as much, and I don't think anybody's going to, if they're projected a top 10 pick, going to stay for a senior year again.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's projected a top 10 pick for sure. But NIL has created this amazing opportunity for system guys, for guys that could be really great college athletes, but aren't built for the program to really get themselves off to a great start in life.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're excited with all the stuff going on at Texas too. I mean, their football, it seems like they're finally back, and it's exciting to watch them and how they're using kind of the NIL money and all that. So,
yeah.
And then, give for the timelines, right? So you won the Heisman Trophy with your senior year, and then after that, you're still going to play baseball right after that, and that's when you're going to spring training?
Well, no, spring training was after my freshman year. So
Okay.
After I finished my senior year, it was really about getting ready for the draft. And so that's when I went to the first draft meeting, and all the coaches, the guys I met with, they're like, you need to focus on football. And so at that moment, I decided to let go of the baseball dream and focus only on football.
So, okay, so then you're prepping for the draft, and then, I mean, your draft, the Saints drafting you is still talked about today because of everything that they gave up to get you. What was your mindset at the time? Were you you felt like that was kind of an ego boost, or did that feel like it added more pressure to you and made you feel stressed?
It was neither. I was upset because I thought I should have gone higher in the draft. I should have gone higher in the draft because, for me, I learned in college that the environment that I'm in is so extremely important to me. And being in an environment with a very rich tradition, it served me extremely well at Texas. And so 1999 was the first year that the Cleveland Browns expansion team came back to Cleveland, and they had the number 1 pick. And so I was really strongly wanting to go to either the Browns or the Eagles. And so when both of them passed on me, my day was already kind of ruined. And then I wasn't even the first running back taken. And then when it got down to the Saints, it probably just in the past couple of years really hit me of how massive of a deal that was. And it'll never be done again. You'll never see one player traded for a whole draft and the first pick the next year.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I saw someone shared an article online about, and the question was Ricky Williams a bust? And it was an interesting debate, because there were people on my side saying that I had 10,000 yards in a productive career. And then someone made the definition that a bust isn't good or bad. It's based off what the team paid for them. Did the person pan out? And if you look at my career, and I was traded in total for 1, 2, 3, I think 4 first-round draft picks, along with 7 other picks in the other rounds too. And so I can look back now and say that was an ego boost. It's that executives that are paid a lot of money to make these decisions. I mean, you can put an asterisk next to Coach Ditka, but executives that are paid to make these big decisions decided to they thought that I was worth a lot as a football player. And there's obviously, I think our success is judged by numbers, our productivity, but I'd like to think of what I brought as far as fanfare and energy and leadership, because one of the things is I was always a star player, but I was also always one of the guys on the team that worked the hardest.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff is invaluable and really tough to show when you're going to contract negotiations and all that stuff. How did they convince you to get on that cover of ESPN with Mike Ditka dressed in the wedding dress? How did that go down?
It was Dan Levitard's idea.
Okay.
Yeah, Dan and I got really close, and he, at the time, he was writing for ESPN, the magazine, and they asked him to write a cover story about the trade. And And so Dan and I were going back and forth with how to capture the image in an interesting way. And Dan's kind of out there, and so he threw that idea out there. And he felt bad about it afterwards, but I said, it's not a big deal. I said, I don't care. I don't, I'm a football player. I don't have to question my masculinity. And I thought and it's iconic. It's, again, one of those things in the moment. I got a lot of flack for it, but it's one of the things that will be talked about probably for the rest of my life.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Dan was right. He definitely did a good job of capturing the moment in an image.
Yeah.
Okay, so then
and then it's funny at the end of that season, Ditka got fired, and I was on the cover of ESPN the magazine, and the title was "The Season from Hell." We should have done a divorce and.
So what was it like for you transitioning from college to the NFL and going into a historically not great franchise at the time, and and then you're just dealing with adversity of that being Texas, a lot of success to going into the NFL, and then being part of a team that does struggle, and then you're also struggling with more injuries in those first couple of years of the Saints that I'm guessing you did in college too. What was your mindset like during your Saints career?
Yeah, like I said, the article, at least my first year, was the season from hell. In my first preseason game, I had a really good first quarter, and then I got a high ankle sprain in that game, and so I missed the whole preseason. And I started the first game of the season and re-injured the ankle, so I only played a quarter in that game. And I was able to bounce back. I'm a tough son of a gun. I was able to bounce back and start the next game, and then the last play of that game, I dislocated my elbow. And we had a bye week, thank goodness. And I played the next game, with my ankle padded up, my elbow padded up, and I had a decent game against the Bears. And they always struggled. Obviously, I was probably 60%, and then I finally got healthy. And then I got a turf toe injury and ended up missing 4 games. So the season from hell, one, because I was in pain my whole entire rookie season. And because of that, I wasn't productive. And I was my first experience since my first year playing football at the age of 12, that I didn't feel like I contributed very much. And so it was tough. But I'm a resilient guy too. And so I worked my ass off, and I came back the next year in week 10 on my 1,000th yard. It's a cool story. On my 1,000th yard, I broke my ankle. And I missed the rest of the season. And when I got to the Saints never won a playoff game. When I left the Saints had won a playoff game. So, I look at my career in New Orleans, and I feel like I had something to do with the Saints eventually getting to the Super Bowl and winning the Super Bowl. So it was cool. It was a cool part of my journey. But yeah, it was very humbling. I had to deal with realizing that I'm not invincible, and that the body will break down.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. It's like a bad breakup, I guess. At least you left the Saints better than you found them.
Exactly. And they got 2 first-round picks. So right, people don't talk about that. They could say Ditka made a bad deal, but the Saints recouped 2 first-round picks when they traded me to Miami.
So do you think there was any regret when they traded you to Miami and then you're all pro your first year at Miami?
No, because one of the reasons that they traded me is because they had Deuce McAllister, who's a really, really talented running back. Yeah. So I'm sure some of the fans were like, why couldn't you do that for us? But like I said, I got down to Miami, where my best friend Dan Le Batard lives, and it's more of a winning tradition and a great environment, and I thrive.
Yeah. So you went from battling injuries to going to the Dolphins and having instant success. You had 1,800 yards and 16 touchdowns your first season with them, and then followed it up with another 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns the next season. So for you, it's probably like, this is what I've been capable of, like flying high. Like, I'm sure those first 2 years of Miami is mostly just positive memories, right?
The first year, the second year wasn't positive memories. 1,300 yards sounds good, but if you look closely at the average per carry, I think it was 4.7 my first year in Miami, and it was 3.5 my second year. And I had more carries the second year, right? So the 1,800 yards, great. 1,300 yards sounds great, but when you realize I had more carries than when I had 1,800 yards, so I got beat up. And it was just one of those situations where, and Dave Onstead apologized to me a couple of years ago at the Super Bowl, is that he was so afraid to throw the ball that he just wanted to play, and we had a wonderful defense. He just wanted to play good defense and give me the ball. And that's not sustainable, you know? And we had good years. We should have won 10 games my first year, but we won 10 games my second year. But I was beat up. I was beat up after that.
So then after your 2 years in the Dolphins, then you get that's when you test positive, right, for marijuana, and you get suspended and all that. What was kind of like, I mean, that story's the one that's talked about the most about you, but it started off with just like a 4-game suspension, and then you kind of went public and said that you were contemplating retiring, or was that just part of like you trying to get out of the suspension? What was your mindset during that whole process?
I was done with football. I was ready for something else. You know, again, we can go back to the beginning of the story. When I was a kid, I never thought I wanted to be a professional football player, but I kind of found myself in that situation and it wasn't working out for me. And then I remembered this isn't ever what I really wanted to do. And all of the adversity kind of helped me wake up to that. And then I had to start asking myself, what do I really want to do? And the first thing that came to my mind is I wanted to travel. And so when I failed that drug test, I thought it was a way out. And so I took it.
Interesting. Yeah, because I mean that's not talked about enough. Like, I mean, with young like college kids or just people in their 20s, like traveling and finding themselves a big thing. But for someone like you who's played baseball and football, like you barely have time to do anything. Like, so you're kind of putting that off, and then you're gonna have that moment down the road where you're like, oh shit, what am I doing with my life? I'm not gonna be playing football forever. My body's already deteriorating. So
that's exactly what happened. Those are the exact thoughts that went through my head. You got it.
So for you, it seems like, again, just from what I see on the internet, it seems like you traveled a lot and then you were studying like holistic medicine. What got your interest in that?
The story, I got beat up, you know, and I realized I was 27 and I was like, I'm young, but I can't lift my arms above my head. You know, I'm in pain all the time. I gotta figure this out. And there's a lot of talk about LeBron spending, you know, so much money on his physical health. I was the same way. And the things that I found helped me the most were holistic alternatives. And so when I started traveling, I kept running into people that were interested in that and having conversations. I fell in love with it. And it became a passion to heal, to get better. And so I tell people the year I took off, I really took a really good care of my body and learned how to take better care of my body in a more holistic way. And I feel like I took years of trauma off of my body. So when I came back after the suspension, I felt younger. I felt fresher than I did before I left.
So for those who don't know, like, what would be a quick summary of what you call holistic medicine, and what are some things that you learned studying that people can apply to like just their everyday body or just a normal non-athlete can use?
Yeah, you know, at the core, it's really a mindset. You know, so I studied holistic medicine. It's usually medicine from the East, because in the East, meaning India, China, etc., they have a different mentality. And so in the East, the idea is what we would call preventative medicine or wellness. And for them, the idea is if you make people strong, then when bad things happen, they can recover faster. Right? That's the general idea. But in order to make yourself strong, you have to know yourself, because all of us are different. We each have different strengths and different weaknesses. And so much of holistic medicine is not about the disease, it's about the person, right? And we don't really treat diseases in holistic medicine, we treat the people. And if we make the people strong, then they can overcome whatever shows up.
What are some examples of some of the practices that you found helpful for you that made you more like stronger and more preventative towards like injuries or disease?
A simple example that most people, pretty much everyone has heard of, is doing yoga. You know, is the idea because yoga is not just stretching. There's some strength exercises, balance, stretching, but a whole lot of breathing. You know, and the idea is if your body is flexible and you have easy access to oxygen, that you're going to heal faster. And then also realizing that for certain people, certain foods are easy for our body to process and digest, and certain foods are difficult. And if your body is spending extra energy digesting stuff that's difficult for it to digest, that's less energy it has for recovery and healing. So it's about appreciating even personal stuff, right? Even the people we surround ourselves with, right? We all have that experience of being around people. When we lead the people, we feel energized and we feel bigger and brighter. and other times around people and we feel smaller and diminished and exhausted. And so the holistic view is realizing that you can't separate what you do when you're at home from what you do when you're at work. You can't separate those things. Is that they're all part of your life.
Yeah, that's summed up really well. So when did you decide to like use what you learned from all this holistic medicine and taking care of your body? When did you decide like, all right, I'm going to apply what I learned and go back to the NFL? What was that thought process like?
So there was a lot of stuff. So I took a year off, and when I left, I thought I was never coming back. When I left, I thought I was never coming back to America.
Oh, really?
That was the plan. That was the plan. And literally, I was on an airplane. I flew from Australia to Thailand, and I was going to spend a couple of days in Thailand, and then I was headed to India to rub hash in the Himalayas. That was my mission. And so I was in a small town in Thailand called Chiang Mai, northern Thailand, and I was taking I was waiting for the cab to take me to the airport to fly to India. And in this small town in Thailand, as I'm waiting for the cab, some guy comes over and he turns the television on in like the outside lobby. And guess what's on the television?
You?
Yes. No, close. It was, again, in Thailand, right? I was leaving. It was the Raiders playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the previous 2 years in Miami, the 1,800 yard and 1,300 yard, I give a lot of that credit to North Turner. North Turner, an amazing offensive run game, like genius. You know, the running backs he's been around in his career, Emmitt Smith, Eric Dickerson, LaDainian Tomlinson. So he knows how to scheme a run game. And so I'm watching him scheming up the Raiders, and I've always had this vision of playing for the Raiders. So in that moment, something hit me, and I was like, I got to go back home. And so I got on the phone. I called there were travel agents at the time. I called my travel agent, and I said, give me the next flight from Bangkok back to LA. And I came back, and when I came back, I went to my agent's office, and I said, I think I want to give this another go. You know, it was like I had got a lot of the trauma, physical, mental, emotional, I got it off of me, and I was ready to give it another try. And I got some skills, you know. I had learned a lot of things. And so that was really the beginning of the process of me coming back.
Okay, so was there any like talk about going to a different team besides the Dolphins that when you came back, or did you have to because of your contract?
Because of my contract. That was another thing. The Dolphins sued me for $8 million. And so that was kind of there in the back of my mind too. So yeah, the idea was for me to work off the $8 million before I was free.
Gotcha. So what was your reaction like? I mean, you've been the star of your team probably since, like you said, you were a little kid, and then you get there and you're splitting carries with Ronnie Brown. What was that like?
It was great, you know. So when I got back, Nick Saban did a wonderful job of bringing me back into the fold. And I remember I was in India, and he told me to call him. So I called him up, and he was like, he has this way of getting you to do things, you know. He's like, it'd be great, you know, if you were back here getting ready for the season, you know. I was like, all right. So I came back from India early, and he put me up in West Palm Beach, and he had the strength coach drive up there every day and work me out for a few months. And so when I came back, and they drafted Ronnie Brown, so I came back in the preseason, and Nick said, "You're the vet, you're the starter," you know. And then I was suspended for the first 4 games because that 4-game suspension came back. So I was suspended for the first 4 games, and when I came back for the first game, Nick sat me and Ronnie down, and he said, "Rick, you're the starter. You know, you guys are going to go 50-50, but you're the starter." And I said, "Ronnie's been doing a great job." I said, "Let him be the starter." And we did 50-50. He did 2 series. I did 2 series. And at first it was an adjustment, but Ronnie's a great guy, and I saw how effective the system was, and we both got enough touches to be happy. So it was a good experience.
Yeah, I mean, especially it takes a little bit of load off you, so you're not carrying the ball all the time and getting those only 3 yards to carry like you did in that other year. So then, yeah, I mean, so you have a great year in Miami with Ronnie Brown, and then you get suspended again, correct? And then that's when you go to the CFL?
Yep, got suspended one more time. And it's funny, when I first got suspended, my agent, Lee Steinberg, called me up and said, "What do you think about going to the CFL?" And I was like, hell no. I said, I'm just going to chill. I'm just going to chill and teach yoga, you know? And so I moved to California, and my yoga teacher is a part of a big yoga organization, and they have a center in Toronto. And my yoga teacher was going to send me to San Francisco to start teaching. And then she said, there's also a center in Toronto. And at the same time, my agent called me up and he said the Toronto Argonauts want you to come up there and play. And so I was like, all right, I'll go check it out. And so I went up to Toronto, and I coach up there, Pinball Clemens, wonderful guy, great organization, love the owners. And so I said, I'll do it, help keep me in shape, and I'll be able to teach yoga. So it worked out.
So yeah, it's on the internet. You fell in love with Toronto, even though your time playing there, the injuries wasn't that long. But what about Toronto was so special to you?
It's how multicultural it is. I didn't know, but it's like, I think the third or fourth most multicultural city in the world. And it's like, it's a kind of a cross between New York and Chicago. It's metropolitan like both, but it's cleaner.
Yeah.
And also the other thing I liked is when I first got up there and I did the media circuit, I heard at least 10 times, what's the big deal? It's only pot. So, and Canada was the first country to legalize cannabis. And so it just was more chill, and I realized how sometimes around certain things, Americans can be kind of uptight. So it was good. It was like a paid vacation, especially when I broke my arm. I was chilling.
So you got to do what you wanted anyways. You got to chill and teach yoga.
Exactly. I got to chill and teach yoga with a broken arm. It was great.
So you're, like you said, at some point you were like, I'm done with football. I'm never playing again. And then you get suspended and you find a way to play in the CFL. And then the CFL, you're going back to the NFL. What do you think kept pulling you back to play football? Was it just the love for the game, or you felt like there was a greater purpose for you, or what was it?
Yeah, it wasn't the love for the game. Not the way people think about it. The love for the game, I think of it more as the love for being great. The one thing I loved about football is there's a whole building, right? There's billions of dollars poured into helping us be the best football players we can be. And that's just a unique opportunity that you're not going to get anywhere, very few other places. So I loved honing my skills, and I loved football because it allowed me to do that and all the wonderful things I learned. But I realized the way I left kind of tarnished my name, and I had to get my name right so that I could make a difference afterwards. Because if it was only the negative stigma, it wouldn't be too much energy to be able to make an impact on people. But I think because I came back and I was able to have another 1,000-yard season and really show people that I grew up, it really opened a lot of doors for me to do the things that I really want to do at post-football.
Yeah, actually, that makes a lot of sense because, the public media was definitely like tarnishing your name at the first. Such a big deal. I mean, nowadays, if someone, I don't even know if you can get suspended for smoking pot anymore, but
no,
back
just fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Back then, It was a huge deal. You were the worst person ever.
Yeah, exactly.
So then you get back the NFL, and like you tore your pec in your first game, and how was the injuries in your first season back?
Yeah. That was kind of a blessing in disguise because I'd been off for over a year. And so, and I knew I shouldn't have come back to play that early, but we were playing in Pittsburgh and it was pouring rain. There's like 2 inches of water on the field. It was crazy. And, got stepped on when I was trying to get up and tore my pec. And so again, it was just an extended vacation, the surgery and the rehab kind of sucked, but like I was getting paid to chill. And it gave me time to kind of reintegrate back into the NFL world. And Cam Cameron was the coach at the time, but they only won one game, so he was fired. And then Tony Sparano and Bill Parcells came to the Dolphins. And to me, that was the greatest blessing in the world. So they hired Bill at the very end of the season when Cam was still there. And Bill had a team meeting, and they called me and said, come on in for the meeting. So I came in for the meeting, and Bill was in the front of the meeting room, and he had this big binder, and he dropped it on the table, and he said, this is the book of all the injuries that you guys have had this year. He's like, if you're in here too much, you are not going to be here next year, And he just kept gave this speech. Basically, he's going to clean house, So I'm sitting there thinking, I'm out of here. I'm trying to think, okay, where am I going to go next? And after the meeting, someone said, Bill wants to see you in his office. And so I was like, wow, that was quick. So I went up to his office and I sat down and he looked at me and he said, I've heard a lot of really good things about you. He's like, we really want you here. We think we contribute a lot to the team. And I just want to let you know. And I was like, oh, I'm blown away. It's blown away. And he was my greatest like champion for the whole time, the rest of the time of my career. Funny story, in 2009, when I ran for 1,000 yards, reason I was able to run for 1,000 yards, I was having a good year, but Ronnie got hurt, I think in week 10. And Ronnie went down, and so I was the starting running back, not full time. And I got to my locker that next Monday, and there was a gas can sitting next to my locker. Like, and I looked, I was like, what is this? And I walked into the training room and Bill was there. And he's like, you got anything left in the tank? Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, you were the longest at the time. There was the longest between 1,000-yard seasons for a running back from 03 to 09. That's when you guys were like starting to run that Wildcat offense, right?
Exactly. Yep. Wildcat helped a lot. Wildcat was fun because, you know, on a football team, there's the team, but most of the time it's offense spending time together and defense spending time together. And even inside of that, it's the position groups, you know, the running backs, the receivers. And so on the Wildcat, we had 4 running backs. So pretty much our whole room was on the field at the same time. So we loved it. It gave all of us a chance to touch the ball and do what we loved.
Yeah, I mean, that was amazing to watch. It was very unique at the time. Who's the one that brought that into the Dolphins offense?
A guy by the name of D. Lee. He was the offensive coordinator at Arkansas the year before with Felix Jones and Darren McFadden, where they ran the Wildcat. And Darren McFadden was also a lefty. And so when D. Lee came to the Dolphins, he saw that we had 2 good running backs. One was a lefty, and he's like, we got to at least try it. And so we did.
That had to be fun. I mean, you're basically lining up as quarterback some plays, right?
Yeah. I mean, people call the Wildcat, you know, it's like the single wing is what they used to call it, where the quarterbacks, running backs were kind of interchangeable. It was fun. It gave defenses hell until they had an off season to prepare, and then wasn't as effective. But we still were able to do some cool things with it.
You think looking back, that was like your most fun year of football, or was it a different year that stands out?
That was definitely my most fun year of football. You know, Ronnie and I became really close. You know, we worked out together. I was in his wedding, and just being able to go back and forth and the friendly competition and the support, it really was great.
So then after that, then you at 09 and 2010, were you playing football then, or when did you go to the Ravens?
So I went to the Ravens my last year. So it was the lockout, and the lockout year was the year I finally made it to free agency, and I had a falling out with Coach Sperano at the end of 2010, and so I kind of knew that I probably wouldn't be coming back to Miami. But because of the lockout, there was no free agency until after the draft, so it was a different situation. So I wasn't signed when training camp started, and rookie running back for the Lions tore his Achilles, and the Ravens at the same time weren't happy with their backup running back position. So my agent at the time, Drew Rosenhaus, called me up and said, the Lions want you and the Ravens want you. And Lions offensive coordinator at the time was Scott Linehan, and Scott was the coordinator with Nick, was with the Dolphins. I had that a good season with him. So I was excited to reunite with Scott. But my agent really wanted me to go to Baltimore because it was a better team and he was closer with their organization. They're offering a little bit more money. But I wanted to be a Lion. So it was really, I loved Baltimore. That's probably, I think, the best organization in the NFL. They take care of their players. Their fans are wonderful. But I would have had more opportunities to play and be a part of the offense in Detroit.
So when you're getting into the tail end of your career, I mean, you've already, unlike most players, you were able to spend years during your playing time, like kind of figuring out what you want to do after football. What are your thoughts towards the end of your career? And at that time, what did you think you wanted to do after you retired again?
Yeah. So the reason I retired the second time is because there were other things that I wanted to do. And, you know, all the time that I was playing after my first retirement, and when I started learning about holistic healing, I would spend all of my off time learning more, taking trainings, taking classes. And so I was ready to do that stuff more full time. And and so I retired after 1 year with Baltimore, and I went full time into traveling around the world and taking classes and teaching.
And so when did that transition and you wanted to create the Heisman Cannabis company?
Yeah. So just about 2015, an old teammate of mine, Kyle Turley, reached out and said, "Hey, there's a conference in Phoenix, cannabis conference in Phoenix. Why don't you come and tell your story?" And I was living in Austin at the time. I went back to Texas to get my degree. And I said, I'm not trying to be out there like that. I said, "Thank you for the invitation, but I'm good." And I hung up the phone and I thought about it for a couple of minutes. And I was like, everybody knows I smoke anyway. And so I called him back up and I said, "Sure." First, I was like, "There's cannabis conferences at convention centers?" This is back in 2015. He's like, "Yeah." And so I flew to Phoenix. And I sat on a stage in front of about 150 people. And I told my story publicly in the open for the first time. And there was something very healing about it, just being honest and telling my story. And then after I finished talking, I was walking around the conference. 20 people came up to me and told me I was their hero. And I was like, "What?" They were in high school or middle school or college, and their parents or coach or whatever was giving them a hard time, and that they could point to me and say, "Look, he does it, and look what he's done." And that's when it hit me. I'm like, wow, my mom would always say, "Go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated." And so I said, I can actually make an impact in this industry. The people kind of get it. And so I started thinking about, what do I want to do? And the first company I launched with my wife was called Real Wellness, still around. And it's more about medicine. It's a purely medicinal cannabis company. And as I was going around to dispensaries and promoting Real Wellness, people kept saying, "Where's the weed at? Where's the weed at?" And I realized, okay, there's a rec side here. And I started to think, if I'm going to do rec, how am I going to approach it? And that's when we came up with the tagline "Spark Greatness," and about using cannabis, because that's what it's all about. As a professional athlete, everything that most of what my mind was thinking about was how to be the best athlete. And so as I used cannabis, it was using cannabis in the spirit of, how can this help me be a better athlete? And putting that message out, and that felt really good to me. So I said, let's do this. Because if you look at brands and messaging around cannabis, it's all crap. It doesn't, there's no substance to any of it. And so I said, this is an opportunity for me to take my own lived experience and tell an empowering story that changes the narrative about how people think about cannabis.
Yeah, it's definitely evolved in the last 10 years a lot since that 2015 conference for you. So, I mean, obviously you were suspended for smoking weed. What percent of your games were you playing like high, you think?
Zero.
It was more of just the recovery, like off the field?
It was just, yeah, I'd go home after and I would let go of all the stress, free my mind, and get ready to come back and do it again the next day.
Interesting. What has been like the biggest challenges or triumphs you've had so far with your cannabis entrepreneur adventure?
The biggest difficulty is that it's still federally illegal.
Yeah.
And so in entrepreneurship, starting anything, you need grit and you need resources, and so we got the grit, and I think that's why we're still around. But it's been difficult. It's been difficult to raise money in this environment. So we're bootstrapping. But I've learned so much. I've learned so much building off everything I learned in football. And football is easy because you got film, you can game plan, and so you're ready. In entrepreneurship, you're building something that's never really existed. So there kind of is no game plan. It's just put something out there and adjust, adapt, and keep it moving. So I've really loved the experience. And, starting Heisman is more of an advocacy play than it is a business play. I think if the advocacy is effective and we get federal legalization, then it turns into a real business. So, that's that part. The business idea that I'm most excited about is one of the things that I discovered in my year off of football was astrology. And I met this woman because, again, I was an athlete my whole life. And then when I retired and started traveling, I didn't know who I was or what I was going to do. And I met this woman and we had a conversation. She was looking at my astrology, and she just said some things that really opened my mind and helped me appreciate things about myself that I don't think I would have noticed or appreciated without her help. And it was so useful to me. I asked her if she would teach me how to do it. And so she started teaching me. And I've been able to help so many people know themselves, understand themselves, and be themselves. Because what I learned in holistic health, wellness, is that in China and India and all these Eastern countries, in their spiritual medicinal systems, they say the number one cause of all disease is not knowing who you are. Because if you're trying to be something else, by definition, it's going to be diseased. If you learn to be yourself, there's going to be a natural level of ease and health and vitality that's naturally there. But from the time we're born, our parents and our culture is telling us who we are. And so I realized, in order to be myself, I had to let go of all the other people's ideas of who I was supposed to be and tap into what I was actually built for, what I'm made of. And so I created an app, learned the code, which has been cool. And I created an app to help people understand themselves better.
What's the app?
And it's called Lila, Lila, and it's on Android and iOS. And that's a real business to me, because it's something that's going to make the world a better place. And it's cutting edge. Most people, when you say astrology, they kind of turn a side eye, or they say, you believe in that shit. But there's not ever been one person I've ever met that has actually studied it, right, and didn't get it. All right, and didn't get it. So,
yeah, I've been learning more about astrology in the last couple of years because my girls put me onto it, and there's just a lot of truths in it you can't argue, for sure. But for you, you're a very smart guy. It looks like you've studied into it a lot. What is your theory, or what is your thought process of what is the science behind of the time and where you're born affecting your personality, what's inside of you? What's the science behind that, do you think?
I wouldn't define it as science the way most people define science, but I would 100% define it as science. So, but the idea is, if you think of the idea of astrology, people don't understand this, but astrology's been around for about 4,000 years or longer. And the definition of astrology is the study of the influence of the planets on human affairs. And when we say planets, we mean celestial objects. We don't mean planets in a astronomical way. So in astrology, we call the moon and we call the sun planets. And the word planet means wanderers. And so we notice that the stars move, they wander through the constellations. And so back in ancient Mesopotamia, the first astrologers were priests and scribes. And what they would do is they would watch the stars, and they would take copious notes about where the stars were and what was going on in the government, in the human affairs, in the kingdom. And so they had 400 years of copious notes every day of drawing correlations between what's going on in the sky and what's going on down here. So it's a science in the sense of it's based off of observation. And these observations have been passed along through generations, different cultures. And as our ability to measure the cycles and to measure the planets increased, the science got better and better. And so a consensus about what things mean has been passed down for 5,000 years. And again, as it's been passed down, it's grown. And so where in astrology, the planets are named after Roman gods, we don't really talk about them as Roman gods now. Most astrologers talk about them in psychological terms. And I find that is really rich, really rich, because all of us are motivated by the same drives. Some of us motivated by some more than others, but we're all motivated by taking care of ourselves and the ones we love, going after the things that are important to us, feeling good, right? We're all motivated by the same drives. And astrology helps us appreciate that and understand how to best fulfill those needs and those drives inside of us.
Yeah, I can imagine too, back in the Mesopotamia time when they were measuring all the stars and stuff, that sky probably looked way cooler than it does now.
Yes, exactly. And, another way to think about it is, right, if we just think of the effect of the seasons, that's an astrological phenomenon. All right, is that if you think of when we first learned that we could plant stuff in the ground and we could provide food for a whole lot of people, right? That was the step we needed to be able to have big cities. So in our evolution as humankind, we had to learn to appreciate the effect of the moving objects on life. the seasons. When is a good time to plant? When is a good time to harvest? That's an astrological phenomenon. You know, and most of the holidays that we celebrate are based off of the calendar. The calendar, another astrological phenomenon. You know, it's just in modern days where all this information is kind of hidden from us, but the concepts of time, seasons, all of that stuff, right? It's born out of observation of the effect of the moving objects in the sky on human affairs. Even if you think of what we put on to wear on a daily basis, right? One of the things that we take into consideration is what is the weather? What is the weather? And we know certain times of the year, right, based on the position of the sun relative to the earth, right, it's hotter or colder, right? That's the effect of a celestial object on human affairs. So it's deep and it's profound, and it's one of those things that you can study for your whole life, and it'll keep unlocking the mysteries of nature.
Yeah, it's, I mean, very fascinating stuff. And every time I dive into stuff like that, I just end up with more questions than answers, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I created the app so people can have a daily way to interact with this information. But I also started teaching, you know, so I do a lot of teaching. I do retreats to really help people like pick up the system, because, you know, I don't believe in doing readings for people. I just teach people how to do it themselves, because people know themselves and their lives way better than I could ever do it. They just don't have the vocabulary or the language to be able to appreciate it.
And that's what the app helps with?
Exactly.
Cool. Well, I appreciate all your time. I mean, you're a fascinating guy to talk to, and you went through a bunch of stuff. The only other question to talk about flying objects in the sky, just as an intellectual guy, what is your opinion on like UFOs or all the phenomena that you're hearing about in the last couple of years with all that?
So I think it's a psychological phenomena of projection.
Really?
Projection, because when I read about all of the UFO stuff and aliens, it reads symbolically the same way as everything I read about astrology, is that there's something out there that has an effect on us. It's the same idea, but because astrology is so stigmatized, but for some reason UFOs and these things are not. So I think there are things that we can't explain, and so we make stuff up.
That's a good way to put it. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Was there anything else last you want to say or plug, or where can the people find you?
Yeah, so people can find me on, people still use the internet, RickyWilliams.life. I'm on Insta at Williams, and Lila, Lila. It's on Google Play and App Store.
I am going to check that app out today. Sounds fascinating to me. So I appreciate you coming on, Ricky Williams, and that's a show.